And Mayor Simons, are you going to kick this off? Mayor Nick Simons from Reddington Beach will be followed by Steve Fields, Claudia McCorkle, Dennis DeTino, Arthur Buser, and Musser and Peter Hastings. So if in that order you can kind of find your way to this corner over here where the podium is, I appreciate it. Welcome, Mayor Simons.
Thank you, Senator and legislative delegation. The issue of short-term rentals in Reddington Beach is a particular concern because of the legislative act that took place in 2011 and amended in 2014 regulating short-term rentals. We at Reddington Beach thought we were grandfathered in, if you will, by an ordinance that we passed in 2008. Unfortunately, there was a procedural flaw with the adoption of that ordinance, and we would like to fix it. But because of that legislative action, we can't fix it. So what I would like to see is a bill sponsored on behalf of other short-term rental communities that have this issue, where perhaps a Pinellas County exemption can come forth, or even perhaps a repeal of that 2011 amended 2014 legislative act regarding short-term rentals. Particularly in Reddington Beach, we have a house that was purchased within the last several months. It was purchased for $4.8 million. It sleeps 20 plus people. It's currently available for $14,000 a week. It has disrupted the lives of the people that surround them. One of them, the Fields, are here today. They live adjacent to that house. We at Reddington Beach would like to be able to regulate short-term rentals. We feel that we know best how to deal with the matter at Reddington Beach, as opposed to the state legislature telling us how to do it. And this issue happens to be short-term rentals, but what strikes at the heart of the matter is home rule. And I would like to see home rule considered by each and every one of you, as opposed to the state telling us at Reddington Beach how to regulate short-term rentals.
Mayor Simons, did the law that we passed in 2011 not provide an exemption for local communities that had ordinances in place?
It did provide for that, so, but our ordinance, if we have not challenged it all.
Your community made the mistake.
Yes, sir.
In the ordinance.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we made the effort to make the new law concur with the ordinances that were in place and not supplant the ordinances. So as opposed to taking the approach that we did something against home rule, I think it'd probably be better to take the approach of how can we fix this special problem that has occurred here.
Okay, yes, sir. And Reddington Beach takes full ownership of that ordinance not being adopted properly. So I mean, that's on us, not anybody else.
Okay. Anyone have questions of Mayor Simons? Senator Brandes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you said it strikes to the heart of home rule, and I just would question whether it doesn't also strike to the heart of property ownership and what it actually means to own property in Florida. And I think that's the delicate balance that we're trying to deal with. The state legislature doesn't regulate anything, and it doesn't preempt anything except for duration and frequency, is my understanding. So I guess the question is, have you put on ordinances for garbage or occupancy or pool hours or a myriad of the other things that communities around the state are addressing without specifically addressing frequency or duration?
Senator, regulation certainly is a step in the right direction. And if we can get some relief from the state legislature on trying to be able to fix our ordinance that was adopted in 2008, then we feel like we can proceed on the regulation side of matters as well. And certainly, this issue is prevalent around the state. It's just not, our beach communities. But the internet is not going to go away, and the availability of short-term rentals isn't going to go away. So regulation obviously is going to be a huge component of that. Yes, sir.
So just to clarify what Senator Brandes was asking you, there's nothing in the statute that prevents you, is there, from adopting ordinances regulating what happens when people use these rentals?
Yes.
The duration, what's the other thing that are preempted? Duration and
Frequency.
And frequency. While people are there, you can still provide for how they act and whether they disrupt the neighborhood and so forth, can you not?
Yes, various local ordinances, and we have those in place on the Woodland Place. They may have to be tightened up down the road, but because of the ordinance that we adopted in 2008 does regulate frequency and duration. And if that ordinance was valid today, I might not be here speaking before you. But because we made a mistake in the adoption of that ordinance, we'd like to be able to correct it. But currently, we can't correct it.
Representative Newton.
What, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Just cycling off the city of St. Pete, 8 years on council, and Senator Brands is saying there is ways and means around ways to control that other than frequency and manner. But what I want to know is, there's a mistake that was made by the local electors as it pertains to home rule and drafting the ordinance. How is this going to affect other communities throughout Pinellas County? Just trying to fix an ordinance that was by no admission that was a fault of your own. How's it going to affect that?
Representative, I can't speak for other municipalities, but specific to my being here, if we had that ordinance in place and it was valid, then we would be attacking this matter on a regulated version as well as the violations of people operating against the ordinance, but I can't speak for any other communities.
Yeah, with 67 counties, the state is different all over the state of Florida. That's why I asked you that. And I just did come off of city government where we did use the low-hanging fruit and the tools that we had to try to control that rather than just saying, just throw them all out, because they do generate tax revenue that contribute to the tax base in this county, if I'm not mistaken.
In the Tampa Bay Times on Monday, there was an issue regarding short-term rentals in Orlando. So, that's just another instance of where it's an issue. And I think if you made the inquiries, you'd find the issue probably can be found everywhere in the state of Florida on short-term rentals and the problems that can arise from it.
Other questions? All right, we have 5 or 6 citizens. Perhaps we can kind of organize this a little bit. We just ask each of them to make a presentation on their specific problems with regard to their neighborhoods, and maybe we'll have questions at the end. Are you Mr. Fields?
I am.
You're recognized.
Looking forward to addressing you, and thank you for this opportunity. You're looking at the poster child of what's wrong with vacation. My wife and I moved from busy St. Pete Beach 12 years ago, and we achieved our dream of living on the sand. We looked for a community that was zoned residential only, no hotels. Our experience in St. Pete Beach was just way too busy for us. So for 9 years, we lived the dream. 3 years ago, a Canadian couple with a marijuana farm in Canada came and bought a house next to my friend here for $2.8 million, started renting it out for $1,500 to $2,000 a night. Raised holy heck with everybody there. Lawsuits are flying around. Then the guy bought the house next to me. It's 8 bedroom, 10 bath, 10 car garage on Gulf Boulevard. He advertised it as a resort until his attorney told him to bring that down. But anyway, our life is holy hell. It has been now for the past year. We had parties all night long, karaoke into the night. We were waking up at 2:45 on Thanksgiving morning. Representative Peters, I apologize to you, by the way. You weren't running my frustrations, but I mean, I have just, I don't know where else to do. I've contacted the governor this week, every senator in Florida, and every representative in Florida. You guys, girls, group can help us. You're the only one. I talked to an attorney who's been working on this for 3 years. He said, you do not have a legal problem, you have a political problem. The problem is in Tallahassee. Our mayor has worked very, very hard. He's up against it because of this mistake the town made some time ago. Not interested in blaming anybody, just want to fix it. And the question I have for you is just tell me how to fix it. I will do anything and everything you say to keep these people from having 30, 35 people at a time stay in that house sometimes. Usually it's only about 20. But can you imagine the amount of trash that builds up in the heart of Florida sun? It stinks. Rats are running around all over the place. I mean, it's just god awful. And there's no, can't go to an attorney, or you can't go to your representatives to get some help. So,
Thank you.
whatever can do.
We want to hear your
anything
stories, and then,
Sure.
I said, we want to hear your stories, and then after that, we'll have some conversation among the delegation, and I've talked to Attorney Bennett, and he's prepared to answer our questions, and we'll try to work through a proposed solution.
Perfect.
Let's just hear your stories now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
The next would be Claudia McCorkle.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Claudia McCorkle, and I live between two short-term vacation rentals, right next door to the south and 2 doors down to the north. And it is a veritable nightmare. For starters, you can't wake up, get your paper, go sit by the terrace, by the pool, looking at the sea, for all the shrieking, screaming, undisciplined, unsupervised children. Then in the evening, you want to enjoy a sunset with a glass of wine, same thing. Unsupervised, undisciplined children. The piercing shrieks are obnoxious. You have to go inside the confines of your own home, but guess what? You can still hear it. Also, these renters do not stay within the confines of their own rental properties. They trespass among single-family owner-occupied properties. They set up their little football games, their soccer matches, their baseball games, total heedless disregard for us residents. I cannot, Kathleen Peters, I know you like the paddleboard too. I cannot even tuck my paddleboard and carry my paddleboard to enjoy paddleboarding on the Gulf of Mexico. There are sometimes so many people that I can't even just dodge them. Do they stop their play action for me to walk by? No, they'll just as soon trample over me just to get to the sea for a swim in the sea. It is absolutely crazy. Now for the grossness. Guess who has to pick up the lewd behavior blankets in the morning? Guess who has to pick up the trash from the liquor bottles, the beer cans, the children's toys that aren't even mine? It's crazy. Well, I've gotten so frustrated, and I really didn't understand why our local officials couldn't help us. But then, of course, now, as you just discussed, we dropped the ball in 2008, and then there's this new 2011 statute. Because of our utter frustration and exasperation, several of us Gulfront homeowners engaged the services of a very qualified land use lawyer by the name of David McCann. I think you all have provided the handouts. And he has come up with, I think, a perfect solution. We do not have to propose new legislation, nor do we have to repeal the existing legislation. Simply, all that's needed is a simple modification of the statute from 2011, as Mayor Nick Simon said, restoring local governments to have the authority to regulate the zoning. So it just, and your legislative session is what, in March? And if that's all that's needed to provide restoration of our community, just a mere modification of the existing statute from 2011, wouldn't that be simple? There's no new proposed legislation. You don't have to repeal anything, just modify and give the local government the right to establish and restore appropriate zoning regulations. Well, then it comes to another thing. Those that are already grandfathered in, what do you do about that? David Mechanic also had another great idea. He said you can ungrandfather. He used the word amortization. And in doing so, since those that have already invested commercially, well, they can still do that for a period of time, a certain grace period, and then restore through local government what was originally written in 1945, R1 zoning. Please, please, your hearts, feel our pain, know what we're going through, use your political and legal finesse to restore order to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCorkle. Mr. DeTeno? Did I get that right?
It's a good Irish name. Dennis Patino. I'm with the Liberty Management Group down in Treasure Island. And we hear these stories all the time. We got 2 of them here. We hear 5 of them a day of the people that come into my office that say, we're looking for a place to rent next year. Can you find us a place that does not have somebody next door? That does not, it's not inside of that condition. So what I'm asking for, for the council is to come to us. I had the opportunity to meet with the attorneys, the mayors down at on the beaches, and it worked out well. Their concerns are there's problems on one half of the street, and there's different problems on the other half of the street. And that's what has to be, and that has to be appraised. We need to make sure that we have the educational process both in the real estate department as well. Because we have real estate people that are selling units that are homes that people are looking for this type of a service to do once they get into it. And the realtors are not being able to come up with a clear and decisive program to be able to give them because of the questions that are going around. And we know that in the future that the realtors will be included in any type of a problem or concern. So I'm just saying, when we're looking at this again next year, I just want to make sure that you include people of us that have been in the industry, because we're not looking to stop it. We're not looking to add more to the codes to enforce, because that's just going to cost more money. We're looking to go ahead and to give the mayors or give each town the ability to design what they need to have for their infrastructure, for what's going to happen. And that's what I'm asking for. It's just the involvement of people like myself, people involved with FVRMA, which is Florida Vacation Managers. I've been around the United States. I've worked with the people in Colorado when it came to a couple of the towns in Colorado on short-term rentals, in Phoenix on a couple of their problems. So it's something that we've been around for a long time. OPA, On-Site Property Managers, is doing something worldwide. We've been involved with each small community to help work, because each small community is different, and it can't be all lumped together. It just can't be. Hopefully, you'll call on one of us to meet with you in the future and discuss some of these concerns that the other our local people have brought to the board today. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's see, Mr. Busser.
Hi, good morning. My name is Art Buser. I'm a resident of Reddington Beach. My wife's grandparents moved there in the 60s. And I'm here to talk about this issue not because I don't have the same acute problems that you've heard thus far. I'm bringing it to your attention because I think there is a larger issue here that if left unchecked only grows larger and possibly is liability to the state. And why do I say that? There is a certain amount of sovereign immunity when there's problems in litigation and adding local law. One just has to look at the hotel industry and look at a company like Marriott. Why did they suffer a $40 million lawsuit when someone drilled a hole in one hotel room to look into another? What's going to happen when a bad thing happens in litigation? Will it pierce the umbrella policy that the person has? Who will that person look to? Who are the deep pockets? Whether it's loss of life or it's videotape, who will that person look to stand behind the damages that they incur? A number of you have brought up the issue of regulation. And when I read the newspaper, what do the people say on the ground they're trying to regulate? If you confront someone who's renting out their house, it's my cousin. Oh, it's a friend of mine. There's no lease. It is inherently difficult to regulate this industry. And again, the gentleman who I follow, I think articulated it well. This is not about every house is rented. Tourism is important. clearly, I've lived in communities where houses exist next to hotels. The issue is one of illegal rentals. And rentals in towns where people clearly don't want. Is it the right use of the sheriff's resources to be responding to calls at 3 a.m., like Mr. Fields has? Only 20 minutes later to have the people start making noise again. Is that where we want our law enforcement resources focused on? Who's going to pay for increased ordinances, the oversight and the compliance of it? It is a cost-benefit issue. Then there's one of financial peril. People might remember timeshare from the 70s, another real estate get-rich gimmick. 2008, 2009, there were tens of billions of dollars of hotel loans defaulted. The hotel business is cyclical, inherently risky. Yet now we see more and more people on the promise that towns cannot enforce short-term rental issues, are being sucked into, being drawn into the promise of, you make a little money, you're not going to get busted, it's going to be okay. When the cycle turns against them, and cycles come and go, what will be the fallout for us and for everybody else who's drawn into the get rich quick, pay for your real estate taxes, because no one's going to stop us? I think it's, my hope for you all is that you can separate the rhetoric from the facts. All I know as a citizen is what I read in the newspaper. And what I see in the newspaper is this: the issue of short-term rentals needs to be maintained because otherwise it destroys jobs. I'll tell you as a homeowner, I also hire landscapers. I hire people to do work. My refrigerator breaks and the roof needs to be replaced. And so I would just ask you, my hope is that when you look at the facts, that the rhetoric can be separated from true facts. Do illegal short-term vacation rentals induce tourism? Has it actually increased GDP? Or is it simply taking demand from one place and putting it to another and avoiding the transient occupancy patterns? Is it also, are some of these homes not, are they homestead? I would also ask you, would you ask your constituents, if you live next door to a house motel at Mr. Fields, do your constituents want this? And just ask them. I ask people on the streets.
Yeah, I think we got flavor here. You know, is there anything else specifically that you have to offer?
No, I'm just asking you to ask your constituency, do they want to live next to motels and let it live like they
Certainly
do
do
that?
that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Mr. Hastings. No, Mr. Hastings. All right. I got a question, and I'm not sure who is the best one to answer this, whether it's mayor or the realtor or county attorney. One thing that's occurred to me is you mentioned these multi-room houses that were set up, 8 bedrooms and so forth. Are any of those being sort of subdivided in the Airbnb process and rented out individually as rooms, or is it rented out in one unit? Does anybody know the answer to that? I don't know which one of you has it next door to you. Nobody knows the answer to that? Okay.
Our experience has been that it's just one group. It's family reunion.
Okay, they're not subdivided, okay. Is there, Mayor Simon? Back here. Have you, or unless you can be loud enough from over there, have you found any of these units to actually have homestead exemption?
Yes, we found one several years ago, and that was reported to the property appraiser and corrected.
Representative Peters.
Mayor, I got a question for you, because when I go through your city, it appears to me that there are no commercial properties. Is that correct? Is your city completely residential?
We have a real estate office on the north end of town.
That's the only piece of
We
commercial
have
property?
the Royal Orleans, which is a weekly, nightly rental.
Okay.
On the north end of town, we have some.
So it's the assumption of people when they purchase to live or decide to live within your community, they're making the decision because it appears clearly that it's a residential community and that's all. And
It's
that
mostly of single-family residences, yes.
that's what I thought. Thank you, sir.
Other members of the delegation have a question before we get started with our attorney.
Thank you.
Mr.
Well, I think the issue of homestead exemption is one I think there is some responsibility of the vacation rental industry if they know or should have known that those homes would have been rented outside of vacation, of homestead. And so I think there is, at least I have some interest in looking into that issue. I think it's also important to know that the Pinellas County at least has an agreement with the vacation rental industry and is bringing in about $63,000 a month currently in bed tax. So there is some bed tax being paid, a substantial amount of bed tax being paid to offset some of the costs associated with the vacation rental industry.
All right, other questions before I get to Representative Sprouse?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Senator Brandis on the homestead issue. Mayor, if I just want to clarify, because I'm not sure if you mentioned it, I apologize. The technical problem that you mentioned in your 2008 ordinance was that it was passed and it was supposed to go to referendum, but it never went to referendum, and it was subsequently challenged. Is that correct?
That's correct. On the advice of our then town attorney, that question was posed and asked and answered that we did not need to go to referendum.
Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
So you're saying that the council asked the attorney at that time, do we have to send this to the residents for a referendum? The advice was given and accepted. You do not have to send it to referendum.
Correct.
Thank you.
Representative Grant?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real brief, would that ordinance you're talking about have just outlawed or extended frequency duration? Is that the purpose? I would talk about frequency duration. Is that what the ordinance would do?
The purpose of our ordinance adopted in 2008 was to regulate duration.
Representative?
Just a question, Mayor. It was, one of the speakers talked about law enforcement and burdening law enforcement. Are they paid with the tax dollars from this real estate rental? Doesn't that pay law enforcement the tax revenue? In your county, your city?
I know the answer to that. The tourist development tax is not used for law enforcement.
Okay. But there's no real estate tax collected off of these, what, $2.8 million properties?
There would be real estate tax collected on the house and at a non-homestead rate, so there would be government revenue.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Representative Aher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little clarification, because as I read down through the complaints on this letter, so if there's this garbage is piling up, do you have the ability to cite them or do something about the garbage? If it is in fact piling up, is that something?
Representative Aher, we have the ability to all of these complaints were brought regarding violations, whether they be noise, whether they be garbage. Yeah, we have ordinances in places that can be done. Once that situation is called to our attention, we address it and deal with it. The issue of noise after hours, or it's incumbent upon the person that hears that noise to call the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office and register a complaint. And
Okay.
hopefully they're doing that.
Okay, and the number of people that are staying there, is there any ordinance or regulation in place for that? Is that something you can do?
It's a single-family residence. I don't know that we could regulate the number of people that occupy that unit.
And